Hey guys, welcome to the Watch. We're looking at a letter dated today, April 17, and it's from predominantly consumer organizations to all these different people in the federal government. And it has to do with they're asking that the federal government and the Treasury Department and other departments make sure that there's money for mortgage servicers because the mortgage servicers are potentially facing a real bind here as more and more people do a forbearance. But they are tying it with some consumer protection. So it's a very interesting letter. Again, let me give you a little bit of background, then we'll look at the letter. So let's say that you have a $2,000 a month mortgage payment to Nation Star. So that's a servicer. Well, NationStar does not own the loan. They may own the servicing rights, the right to collect payments and make sure you have insurance and taxes paid and all that, but they don't actually own the loan. Some investor owns a loan, or some trust owns a loan, or sort of a quasi-governmental entity owns a loan. So if you get a forbearance for your $2,000 a month payments and you don't have to make those payments, NationStar still has to send $2,000 to the owner of the loan. And so they're kind of raising Cain about this, going, hey, we're going to be wiped out here in 30 to 60 days. And so far, the response from the federal government has been a little bit of, we think you're exaggerating. But this is a letter from consumer groups saying, you know what, there's some legitimacy to what the servicers are saying, but don't give them the money unless there are very strict conditions. Now, I don't know if this will ultimately be the law, but I think it's a sort of an even-handed approach here. And so I wanted to show this to you. So they say, hey, thank you for helping to stabilize the economy. And here we've got, well, if I can get this to highlight here, the undersigned consumer civil rights, real estate, other organizations are asking for liquidity facilities through which mortgage servicers covering forborne, so a forbearance, consumer payments can obtain funding to cover potential shortfalls and advances to bondholders. So for some reason my highlighting's not working, so I'll just try to indicate where I am. They say such liquidity must be tied to borrower protections. And so here's the, hey, there it is, it's working now. So here's the deal. Here's the danger to the non-bank servicers. There's create a significant risk that mortgage servicers will face liquidity. In other words, they're running out of money. Problems in the short run could lead to disruption for borrowers in the entire market. So it could range from 33 billion to 66 billion over 6 months. And without access to liquidity to help cover the contractually obligated advance payment. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, even though you get a forbearance, your mortgage servicer still has to send the money. They just have to reach into their own pocket to do it. Now, this is saying without that, the lending industry would not be able to advance these payments, undermining the existence of relief efforts and requiring more government intervention. And so they say, look, if investors conclude that the payments are in jeopardy, the entire housing finance system could face a liquidity crisis. And then this has greater impact on low wealth households, borrowers of color, veterans. And so let's get to the kind of the part where they say these should be the rules. And I think these are good rules here. So servicers must use liquidity payments for borrower assistance by covering the funds not collected. So it shall not be used for other purposes such as paying dividends or bonuses to executives. Now, I sued NationStar a lot, okay? So I don't ever really want to be defending them, but I will say this. When they proposed something similar to this, they said, we're not going to use it for our operating expenses. We're not going to use it for salaries or buying back stock. That's what happened in the Great Recession. All this money was given to companies, and then they did things that really benefited the executives, which was not really the purpose of it. So this is just saying, look, you can't use it for that. And just like we looked at in the last video, the CARES Act, there can't be anything beyond your normal payment as far as penalties or interest or anything like that. So then this is to me, the most important part of this whole thing. If this becomes a law, this will be fantastic. Servicers must agree to offer uniform forbearance terms to all borrowers, regardless of the investor to whom the payments are owed. So right now, depending, is this a federally backed loan? Who's the investor? Maybe you can get a forbearance, maybe you can't get the forbearance. They're saying any servicer that takes this money, they got to treat everybody the same, which I think would be fantastic. And so then they say there's got to be a sustainable reinstatement. We don't want the borrowers worse off because of forbearance. That's starting to get into the details. I mean, how long can a forbearance go? Then do they start looking at your financial condition? And then there are some other things in here. And you can read this letter. You can look it up. But this just shows you who's doing this. So, Center for Disability Rights, NAACP. We've got National Consumer Law Center, that's NCLC. It's been a long day. But that's the group that produces just a fantastic set of consumer law books. So on every subject, credit reporting, repossessions, foreclosures, student loans, everything you possibly want. It's a fantastic series. And so they do really, really good work. And so I share this with you to say, this is kind of showing you now that we're having this almost unique alignment of interest. So you've got the mortgage servicer saying, hey, we need you, the federal government, to basically let us borrow money to make these payments we're obligated to make, while consumers don't make the payments to us. And normally, my side, okay, so representing consumers and servicers, we don't ever end up on the same side. We're kind of united in this, though, with this caveat that they should only get that if they agree to more protection for consumers. In other words, they shouldn't get all that money and then be able to say, hey, we're not going to give consumers forbearances. No, you've got to treat everybody equally under that CARES Act. And if you have questions about that, just look at our previous video where we talk about the CARES Act on credit reporting and on the forbearance. But the forbearance is only for federal type mortgage loans. So we'll see how this plays out. Right now there's some resistance in the administration to giving or loaning all this money to the mortgage servicers. So will they change? It probably will depend on how many people are asking for forbearances and what kind of strain that puts on the servicers and ultimately on the housing market as a whole. So we'll see. And, as you watch that, and if you sense that maybe your congressman, congresswoman, somebody that you have a connection to is moving in that direction, you might just remind them, hey, that's fine to help out the mortgage companies, but make sure that they provide this uniform forbearance for anybody that's affected, regardless of who the investor is on the loan. So appreciate you watching it, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.